comes on our show yesterday, says this weekend's game for the Baltimore Ravens against the Pittsburgh Steelers is a must-win for two-time MVP Lamar Jackson. Jeff Saturday, ESPN NFL analyst on Get Up, earlier this week, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN, had this to say about Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson they have to win this game. If you talk about how great a season it is, it's all this, you got to go beat the Steelers. You're 1-4 against the Steelers. We talk about pressure games and playoffs. This is a playoff game. They better look at it that way because they have underwhelmed everybody this season. And with the talent they have, in a division opponent, you got to get this win.
Smalls, help me understand this because I don't. I thought we were judging Lamar Jackson's season based on postseason success or maybe lack thereof. I thought people like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen graduated specifically to what they do on that top line of the resume, MVP or postseason success relative to the Super Bowl. How could an in-season game, Week 16 against the Steelers, be a must-win for Lamar Jackson?
Because while you're right, we are going to ultimately judge Lamar based on what happens in the postseason. We're collecting data points along the way that will help inform us whether or not we think he can do it. And what are the big knocks on Lamar? It's usually not about his regular season performance. It's about the playoffs. It's the fact that he can't beat the Chiefs. Oh, and he can't beat the Steelers either. It's about Lamar's ability to step up on a big stage and win a big consequential game. That's the knock on him. And whether or not it's a postseason game or it's a very important rivalry division game that will be consequential to what happens in the playoffs, Lamar does need to prove that he can win these games. Jeff Saturday just gave it to you. 1-4 versus the Steelers as a starting quarterback, 36.1 total QBR, 57 completion percentage. Lamar has to be better when it comes to these big matchups, and this is a huge opportunity for him to make a statement versus a team that's really plagued him his entire career.
Yeah, and all of those marks, all of those metrics that you just gave, those are career worsts for Lamar Jackson. So to me, it's about competitive greatness, being at your best when your best is required. That's in the playoffs, and that's in what should be a rivalry game. And the reason why I frame it that way is because it's not a rivalry when one team has won 8 of the last 9 games. That's where we're at. The Pittsburgh Steelers have owned the Baltimore Ravens. They've owned Lamar Jackson, and something about that has to change. And if Lamar is in the conversation for one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world every single year, then this game shouldn't be so one-sided. And what puts a little extra sauce on this one is that this is for the division. Mm-hmm. When you look at the remaining schedule for the Steelers after this one, they got the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, they could absolutely lose at least one more of those games. So if you're the Baltimore Ravens, you have an opportunity, if you handle your business and win out against the Texans and the Browns, all of a sudden now you're looking at a home game in the postseason instead of being on the road during the wild card round. And Evan, to your point, it's about making sure that Lamar Jackson has the best opportunity for a deep playoff run. You'd like to start the postseason at home if you can. And so I think that's why there's so much focus on this particular game, just because it means so much. And after falling flat last year at home in the conference championship game, we want to see more from Lamar. You can't be a future Hall of Famer and have your worst games of the season every single year be in the playoffs and be against the Steelers.
Well, kudos to you, because as much as I love Jason McCourty and Jeff Saturday, and I do, and they're awesome, and they join us weekly, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Go back on the podcast and listen. The way you just framed it, I am okay with way more than what they said. I don't believe this is a must-win for Lamar. But if you frame it under the premise of, in order for Lamar to accomplish the single and only thing that he has left to accomplish as an NFL player, which is getting to and winning a Super Bowl, doing it at home would be the easiest way for him to do that. So regardless of who they're playing, whether it's Pittsburgh or Carolina, every game the rest of the way is in essence a must-win because they're behind the Steelers right now, and their best path to New Orleans for the Super Bowl is by staying in Baltimore. If it's framed under that lens, I'm cool with it. In general, there cannot be a must-win Week 16 game for Lamar Jackson, who's a 2-time MVP, first ballot Hall of Famer, because it does not eliminate his chance to accomplish the only thing left, which is winning a Super Bowl and getting to a Super Bowl. Is it more likely than not they don't do it if they have to travel for every game? Of course. But it's certainly not impossible when you have that man playing quarterback.
Well, it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely, right? I mean, the last time we saw a team go on the road for all 4 games was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you have to caveat that because the Super Bowl that they won was in their home stadium. Before that, it was Aaron Rodgers back in 2010. So you're talking about it happening once a decade, right? And we just saw one in 2020. So I guess that's the part where you feel like the Ravens and Lamar specifically have to have that urgency to be able to get this done just so they can have the potential to host a home playoff game, because with him as your quarterback and with the roster that they have, I mean, it is Super Bowl or bust. Mm-hmm. That's how we're going to judge the Baltimore Ravens. It's a championship organization that has one of the 3 best quarterbacks on the planet. You should be in the conversation for teams to go to the Super Bowl. And considering the path that you have to go through in the AFC with quarterbacks like Josh Allen, with quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, knowing that if you face off against one or both, you're going to be on the road for those games, you would like to make it a little bit easier for yourself in starting out round 1 at M&T Bank Stadium.
Okay, but let me ask you a series of questions to both of you here. Just yes or no. Do you think the Ravens could go to the Super Bowl this year?
Do I think they could go to the Super Bowl? Yes.
Okay.
The only way they can go to the Super Bowl is if somebody takes out the trash for them. If somebody beats the Kansas City Chiefs, then I think the Ravens have a chance to go to the Super Bowl. I believe this Ravens team matches up favorably against the Bills. The only way they
Okay. So do you think they could go to the Super Bowl if they lose this week? Because somebody could still beat the Chiefs, and Smalls, you just answered yes, that they could go to the Super Bowl. Could they go to the Super Bowl if they lose this week?
No, because they're going to have to turn around and play the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
No. So if they got to
definitely.
Well, more likely than not. I guess that's my point. Like, if they've got to play Pittsburgh, if they got to play Kansas City, they're not going to the Super Bowl. Those matchups aren't good for them. We've seen that, which is why this game is so important. Like, you want to try to avoid those teams. If you're talking about the Ravens having to play the Texans, the Ravens having to play the Chargers, the Ravens having to play the Bills, anybody else other than those 2 teams, I feel good about the Ravens. But if they got to play those 2 teams, I don't think it's going to go well.
So basically what you're saying is if the Ravens lose tomorrow, it's actually in their best interest to be the 7th seed. Because you're saying that matchup-wise, they're probably not going to be the 5 seed potentially, or they may not be the 5 seed if they lose tomorrow, but it's actually in their best interest in your mind because of the way they match up with Buffalo that they're better off as the 7 than the 6 in essence.
So you're saying
go on the road at Buffalo.
You think the Chargers will be the 5 seed?
I'm saying, well, the Chargers' schedule is insanely easy. They have New England and Vegas.
I'm just asking. So you're saying the Chargers will be the 5 seed in your scenario that you're paying out?
Let's just do this here quickly. I think they would have an easier shot than the Ravens would at that point, because the Ravens would have at the Texans home against the Browns, and then the Chargers would have those 2 games against New England and the Raiders. So, yeah, sure. Let's play that out that way. Yeah. But based on what you're saying, matchup-wise, because I know you've been very keen on specific the big 3 of teams with the Ravens, Chiefs, and Bills for you, CC, that all of it is based on who they're playing specific matchups, that based on that, it's almost as if you're saying if the Ravens lose tomorrow, keep losing because you're better off going to Buffalo from a matchup perspective.
Listen, I'm not going to say that it's in a team's best interest to lose, but I also can acknowledge that styles make fights. Like, I go back to the championship run that I had in 2011 with the New York Giants. We knew that we can go to San Francisco and win that football game because we played them, and it was a 4th quarter game in the regular season. But we also knew we couldn't go to New Orleans and beat the Saints because we got smoked in a primetime game in the regular season. So, again, it comes down to matchups. It comes down to the draw that you get once you get into the tournament. And for the Ravens, the Steelers and the Chiefs are a bad draw. And we've seen that year over year.
And obviously the only problem with that argument I just made is if you do beat the Bills, you automatically get the Chiefs because you're the lowest seeded team in the AFC. So you would not have it, to use your terminology, someone else taking out the trash for you. Coming up, can he or can't he? Brought to you by Granger. Next on Sportsmanlike on ESPN.